Okay, so it's time to start this bad boy. So here we go. Well, hello. I'm this is Jim Morgan. I'm with Fisher's Historical Society, and tonight is Fisher's History Chat. And we've got John Baldwin here, and I'll let him introduce it and give you all his background and stuff. But John is involved in something that's very exciting to me. In fact, if you've ever driven through Home Place, if you've ever gone down College, I know for me, for decades, I was driving by this little bitty frame house that had been, and it said military museum. And I kept waiting to see if I could see a car out there or something so I could get in there. And one day I just went up and knocked on the door and got a phone number. And next thing I know, I got a phone call from John. And he's been really busy making that into a real live entity. So it's now going to be a Hamilton County, not just Home Place, right?
Yes, sir.
So John Baldwin, um, tell me about who you are, and then what's going on with this little house.
All that stuff. Well,
Yeah.
not to belabor it at all, but I first came across this 12, 13 years ago. Why that's important? I'd been doing things with the county government emergency management agency for some number of years. Moved into the home place area back around 2013 or so, and knew that the what they call the Greater Home Place Neighborhood Association been around since the late 90s. That'll come into play here in a second. They met in the building every month for their regular meeting ever since that time. Well, somewhere along the way, there were two veterans, Korean War veterans, who got the name of Marvin Pike and Jack Edwards. They were boyhood friends and lived not far from that 108th and North College intersection. And that building's been around since about 1950, we've learned. So Marvin was in the Marine Corps, went to Korea to the Chosin Reservoir action. That was his big battle. Meantime, his boyhood friend was in the Navy Reserve, stayed right here in the Indianapolis area, and used to do his drills down at what used to be called the Naval Armory, which I understand is a school now recently.
Right.
So um, the inside of that museum, after both these gentlemen passed away, 2005 and 2007 for Marvin and then Jack. For whatever reason, the other veterans who were meeting with them, as they populated the place with so much that Jim, you were able to see, and I'll show you in
Right.
pictures here in a while. Um, Unfortunately, when those two fellows passed away, nobody really took up the mantle. And we talked with Doug Callahan. His name may be familiar because he was a township trustee for several years, a fire chief within the Carmel Fire Department and all. So he was literally next door in the government center that was there. And he told us, he said, well, I don't know what's going to happen with the stuff, but we keep the building going. We use it for a few other things, but basically the neighborhood association meets there. So for whatever reason, they kept the lights on for decades. So unfortunately, again, these two fellows passed away. And within the last couple of years, some of us got together and decided let's preserve the content that's there, but also how can we make it so that the veterans in our area, I'll just phrase it that way, were able to tell their stories. Because one of the consistent things we've heard for a long time is that so many veterans are passing away, leaving the county, but anyway, they take their stories with them. And families, especially the mothers, daughters, sisters, granddaughters, especially, but very concerned about those stories, but they don't know them. And there's an endless number of them. I know Jim, rather, you told me about an uncle who you only found out some things after he passed away earlier this year. So
Right.
that's another story, but it's very similar. So why was this important to me? I actually grew up in the northeast part of the country. Came out to Franklin College in the late '60s. That's how I tripped over Indiana. Graduated there 4 years later with a fiance and a degree in sociology, which I never used. not professionally anyway. But I also, about the same year I graduated, got into the Army Reserve. And I said, this was 1971, not the best time to be in the military. Vietnam was still pretty active, a lot of things going on. And when you interviewed Terry McCarthy last time, I watched that video, and it was very interesting. A lot of good things. So anyway, 22 years later, I walked out of the Army Reserve as a retired, veteran, and at the end of my career, I went to Desert Storm. So I juggled the full time job, family, and being in an Army Reserve unit, all every year in and year out, and then went to Desert Storm, and I was on active duty for almost a year. So in 2012, 2013, moved into the home place area, therefore Carmel, therefore the county, and then came across this museum, which at that point I realized had become a time capsule ever since the veterans passed away. And Jim, the backdrop in your office, now that I got a chance to see that, does look something like the inside of what we have. And also the
I
picture.
told you, I kind of decorated like either museum or Cracker Barrel. Yeah. So yeah.
Right, right. Um, so so when we say museum, I found people will automatically think about basically a large box of stuff. And there may be a uniform in there, there may be some other artifacts, things like that. But what about the person that wore that? What if they took that bayonet to combat? All those things. We don't really know that. And as well as, I mean, I've got my own stories too, but nothing like what Terry McCarthy went through and a variety of other people. But those stories aren't known. You may hear about them in podcasts like this and other situations, but nobody's really recording those. So the families of the veterans have something that they can listen to. So that's important for a lot of reasons. So anyway, we discovered that with this time capsule and the museum itself, weren't really sure what the future is that going to be, let alone. So picture this: we have over a third of a million people in our county. It's the wealthiest county in the state as far as that goes. The one of the statistics I've learned is that there's about 14,000 living veterans according to the last census figure. That's an awful lot of people. There's 7 VFW American Legion posts, 3 museums and historical societies, of course, that are supporting them. But there's more than that, because the Fishers Historical Society would make the 4th one. There's several preservation alliances. There's a lot of interest in that, and there's a number of military markers and monuments around the state, but also here in the county. But there doesn't seem to be any public military museum where the focus is let's capture the stories. That is the stories the veteran wants to tell, that the family and the public can access later on. And even before that, so our first missions become, how about a place that we're calling an honor roll for public recognition of any veteran affiliated with the county. And we all know the ultimate affiliation would be as if they're buried here somewhere. So we found that there doesn't seem to be a single place in the county, one that was, again, a public military museum, let alone where can I get information if a grandchild is, say, in one of the local schools, and they want to get information on that family veteran which they heard about, but they don't really know anything else. Where do they go to find that out? I mean, they truly could go to 6 or 7 posts around the county just to begin to say, do you people know this guy? Okay. So we saw a big lack there, and the basic recognition is important. So the second thing would be, well, how do we come up with a place for them to tell their stories, show items which they have, memorabilia, one of all-inclusive term, and it could be anything, but it's important to them. It's related to their service, and let alone once all those things may be in place, what about being able to connect with those people and have them connect with other veterans? We're not talking about services. There's an awful lot of outlets here in this county, as well as just in Indiana, for services for veterans for a whole variety of things. And their mental health services, their housing services, just a variety of things. And there's the camaraderie of places like the posts. But what about the public face of veterans here, where they can proudly say, "I know about other veterans side by side, and I get recognition, and I can tell a story," and it could be any story. So, in a not so quick nutshell, um, the basic idea is to create that place to have a public recognition, be able to tell the repository for their stories and stuff. And you've seen the house, out from the outside, Jim, and at least one time inside. It's 1,020 square feet, according to the property records. And it's a 1950 era building, typical, one family house primarily. It's been rehabbed on the inside for a number of things, but it has just that much space. So, and we're getting some donations now that word is getting out to more people that, oh, gee, all of a sudden there's a place where they find a Foot Locker or a tote, in the shed outside, the basement, whatever. What can we do with this? And especially because we've heard a number of what I think are heartbreaking stories where people are saying nobody in the family wants this stuff, but it's important to me.
Right.
I just met a veteran last week at the Carmel American Legion. It was interesting. He's originally from out of the area. The way he tells the story, he came down out of he grew up in East Chicago. His father was a U.S. Marine raider during World War II. Between his sister and him, they have a Foot Locker and the guy's uniforms, a number of other things. And then towards the end of the conversation, he says, "Oh, by the way, I have I have his 1911 model 1911 Colt 45." Okay, and then he said his father carried it in World War One. My father carried it as a Marine Raider in World War Two. Well, and he was a veteran too. So those stories don't come out unless you just have the conversations with people. So we didn't get to the point where we're going to try to record that necessarily and make it available. We'll have further conversations with the guy. But those are the kind of things that we're running into. So,
Well, yeah, it makes me sad when I'm in the business carrying transitions. We help people do estate sales, online auctions, whatever, and it's amazing to me how often I'll find artifacts or memories or history, and
yes,
the family has no interest in it whatsoever. We found this one family, and I bid on it. Fortunately, someone else, paid more for it, but I was going to buy it because I just didn't want it to disappear. It was
right.
medals from World War One. I'm like, and the family was couldn't have cared less. And I'm like, how do you get there? How do you get your head wrapped around not caring about grandpa's
I
great grandpa's whatever?
I know. Uh, we'll make a plug for one of the other museums I've come to know about in the state. Up in Portland is a place called the Museum of the Soldier. And the story is that the three gentlemen, one of whom I learned and had a chance to meet him, was the county historian. So he's the equivalent of David Highway here in our county. And he said, I was driving through a small Indiana town, a side street, and I saw an older woman come out with a tote full of things, open top tote. And as I was slowly driving by, I saw her empty it into a garbage can, and I saw a set of Marine blues just fall out and into the trash can. He says, I immediately stopped the car, turned around, went back and talked to her. And she said, her story was this was my husband's uniforms, including his dress blues, and very decorated, combat veteran. Nobody in the family, nobody says, I've talked to everybody who might want this stuff. Nobody wants it. So all I could do was just go throw it away. That's a heartbreaking story as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So we're hearing more and more like that from that standpoint. So uh, today we got a small group of people. It's a nascent effort as we're trying to get things going. Give you some more information here when I can show you some slides on it. And um, we don't see any reason why we shouldn't have a place, not just locally, but because these two veterans who started it and other veterans that came to join them were within a few blocks to a mile or two of that area. The others were drawn in because they had what was called the War Years Discussion Group, and they they billed themselves as the home place detachment of the World War II Roundtable. So there's another group. They had their own discussion group as far as that goes. They had a veteran which we interviewed a few months ago that actually was the president of the roundtable for a time. He led a trivia challenge with every meeting they had. They met once a month. And they would also open the place up on a Friday morning. I mean, so the story goes that one of them would show up with, get the coffee on and donuts and something, and then go to your local McDonald's and other places like this. You can see a group of typically older guys, and who knows why they were getting together, but there's a number of veterans doing that. We'd like to be able to get that open again until we get word out there that, hey, this is a place to come see and do things. And we also see that there's just so much room we have. Again, going back to the 1,000 square foot older style house, we're going to need offsite storage and nothing else because example, the adjutant from the Carmel American Legion post, a fellow by David Leonard. David approached me. He said, "We have some things that we found in our garage in the back of the post." Oh, okay. Come to find out, one of them was a tote where he said, I had a conversation with someone called up, had no idea who they were. They said, "We're not related to this veteran, but he was active in your post there in Carmel, since passed away, and as far as we know, has no family. But we have a box of his stuff, one of which was a Purple Heart certificate, other items." So Swede Carlson, that Swede was his nickname, he went through a replacement depot in Macon, Georgia in 1944, according to what we see, and then went over to Europe. And so he wasn't there for the D-Day landings. Okay, but we have some kind of history there. Unfortunately, his wife has passed away, his daughter, and then I think her husband has passed away. And you know, with a little bit of research, we found that there was another relative that lives in Arizona or something as far as that goes. But so we took it over as a donation. He also gave us a book from 1920 published by the federal government titled Photographic History of the Great War. Not World War One, of course, because 1920 they didn't know. The thing is about an inch and a half thick, very thin pages, but it is chock full of photographs I've never seen most before. Broken binding, a few other things. So one of the things we want to do is we want to preserve that. We hope to be able to, I'll say, open it once on a flatbed scanner so that we can just photograph that so it's accessible.
Yeah. And then
Another thing,
digital.
yeah, another thing that he also had in a stack was, for those who know, Dr. Raudebush, who was so instrumental in we've learned, improving the care for the VA, and his name is on our local VA center. Kind of find out somebody on his staff, and I think he was doing it too, put together about 7 or 8 large format scrapbooks that had to do with that effort, including times he apparently ran for Senate. Okay. Also, along with that, tucked in those 7 or 8 was something about the same size, which is about, say, figure 20 by 30 inches, is the complete set of stars and stripes from World War One. It's a
Wow.
bound volume with an embossed cover on it. Looks like a big old ledger book. Okay. Talk about tissue thin paper. One more thing where that's wonderful. So again, we inherited these things because somebody said, "You got a military museum. I get, well, you want this? We're not going to turn it down." Now,
Right.
the whole idea is how can we make that accessible? We need volunteers to be able to do that because the local libraries, Fisher's Library, especially where David Highway works, and the Carmel Library have media labs where they have large format scanners, and so we need people with white gloves and time and patience to sit there and make that so that through a website you can get to that kind of information. With any luck, we'll have more things like that. I notice you've got the front page of an important newspaper in the back behind you.
Right.
We have a number of those, and there's a fellow by the name of Steve Hardwick. Some people may know him. He lives in Carmel. He's a teacher down in the Lawrence schools. Come to find out, over a number of years, he's built up the middle. I think it's middle school classes that he's done. He's had for years, and so not only have they done research on veterans, but they've also created basically a celebration of Valley Forge, and so built up this. So it's quite a production. But then also along the way, with a number of things he donated to us was he created basically a USO show using his students. And so he's collected newspapers from the era, Life magazines, Yank magazine, a bunch of the others, all from World War II. And we now have a lot of that stuff. I think his wife breathed a sigh of relief because it's not down in the basement anymore. But this is important items here as far as that goes. So we can proudly say, contact us, and we can, open the museum up. And then we're going to have to come to terms with. We have maybe 800 or 900 books in there. No rare editions that I know of, but we have these newspapers. We now have a few books. We have the Stars and Stripes. How are we going to be able to preserve that? And so we need local historians who will come help us. We'll get into some more about how we're going to display things. So it's, as somebody said in a movie a long time ago, it's a target-rich environment for opportunities. There's an
Right.
awful lot of things there, and there are three good museums in the county that are that show the history of what the county has done, and valuable. For example, I could go to the Cromwell Clay Historical Museum, and their website, understandably, proudly says we have over 2,500 period photographs. That's fabulous. Good for them. They but they've also told us that they don't have any military items, and really been relying on the small hip pocket museum that's right there in Home Place to have the military items, which they have. We've only found two other displays in the county. One's at the Sheridan Museum, and one's in the jail museum downtown Noblesville. And again,
Okay.
there's some items on display. What we'd like to be able to do is link to those and promote that fact that that is there. And we've now joined what's called the Hamilton County History Collaborative Group, which is actually run by Jessica Lehman, who works with David Highway. She's the president of that group. And it's the first one I know of that's trying to collect rather, all the historians that are in the historical societies, the preservation alliances, and the museums, and say, we have a community of historians here. So they've just recently produced a pamphlet as a guide to all those museums, including a map. Jim, I don't think you've seen that one yet. We just got copies
No,
of
I
it.
haven't.
Yeah, we'll make sure that you get it.
I'm going to
And
that next meeting, so I'm looking forward to
good,
that.
good.
So,
I'm glad to see you there as far as that goes. And I know I tried to introduce you to Jessica from that standpoint. Also, I know that Cheryl Smith's on your board. We've met not only her but her counterpart, Heath Aburn, I think it is, for the Jonathan Jennings chapter in Carmel, headquartered in Carmel. Those two DAR chapters are excellent researchers,
and
and
by the way, Shirley, one thing with her, she
yeah,
also has been a longtime researcher of Revolutionary War soldier graves in Hamilton
yes,
County, and whatever.
right. Interestingly, we also have people in the neighborhood association here who want to help clean up and maintain the grave site at a place called the Pleasant Grove. Used to be Pleasant Grove Church, small grave that actually we found it have two soldiers in the War of 1812 who were
Wow.
interred there. Yeah, which is prior to when this was a county, as far as that goes. So anyway,
Right.
so we've had good conversations with Shirley as far as that goes. Interestingly, um, she
Not only
says,
was it not a county, it wasn't a state. We were
yeah,
just a territory in 1810. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
1860.
Shirley has offered us. It's about 25 volumes of what really was her doctoral thesis on some aspect of the Civil War. I haven't seen
Awesome.
these things yet, but I can understand where she would approach us. That she hasn't been to the museum yet, but we've had good conversations with her. And those are the kind of things, like, there doesn't seem to be any other place in the county where someone could say, yeah, we'll take that, let alone let the world know about it, and
Right.
where it can be, make it so that you can access that kind of thing, which could be, um, come in, sit down, we'll get the thing out for you so you can look at it on the table, that kind of thing. All those things have to be worked out. It's not a quote unquote a real museum yet from that standpoint, but we're well on the way.
Well, did you get your all your status things you were trying to do because it had never been really recorded as a museum? I know you were in the process of trying to get
Sure,
that done.
sure. Well, thank you for asking. We've had a not-for-profit established since February of last year, as far as that goes. But with only the last couple of months, finally, for whatever why it was ever being held up in the IRS, we have not only the 501c3 tax exempt designation for people who would like to be able to donate, no matter what it is, and then get the tax exemption for themselves. So somebody must be looking out for us because the IRS office also included a section on 170. I'd never heard of that before. And there's several letters in parentheses after that. Basically, what it covers is bequests, transfers, and things like that. So that would pretty well cover the kind of things where somebody may want to, again, say estate planning, transfer some things to us that way. And you probably know about that situation with your business than we do, of course. So we have that capability. Just within the last few weeks, we actually were able to sign a lease agreement with the township trustee. And part of that was a resolution by the township board to transfer all that memorabilia, which was donated, over to us.
Excellent.
Prior to that, people could walk in and say, "Well, museum." And what I found out is the well-meaning veterans, built around the two guys that really got together, started this. They never created a legal entity called a museum. So by default, I've learned, not a lawyer, all the items which they literally, as the story goes, they'd come in. Oh, there's a bare space in the wall. I got a nice plaque I'd like to put up there, or here's a photograph of me on a ship. Those kind of things. So that's how it grew, and it looks like a military man cave, and I don't say that with any denigration at all. And so they basically by default the trustee's office ended up owning everything in the building as far as those things go. So key thing for us was no way to go anywhere else with it. So let's nail down the physical place. So that's what the lease does for us. We have to have liability insurance to be able to, a standard thing you'd expect. And we have to insure some of the items in there, if nothing else, for theft and those kind of things. And with the lease, we also are able to say we have possession of the items. So we were giving what I've learned is called a deeded gift. So someone wants to donate this or loan it to us. Either way, just check the different box on the form. And then, well, of course, we'll keep track of it if it's on loan. And then we need to access this just like any museum, give it its own property number. Then we have to figure out how we're going to be able to keep track of those things, but also the things you don't want to take the book from World War I photographs and just lay it on the nearest coffee table and say, look at it. Because as soon as you open the front cover, you find that the binding's broken, those kind of
Yeah.
things. We'll have to have local historians help us figure out how we're going to take care of it. So it's really going to be a labor of love to get the people involved. And I'm sure they'll come to it and understand that this is well worth it. Another aspect of this, of course, is we're talking about the stories. So we need basically volunteers, could be veterans, for peer-to-peer interviews to basically sit down and one, offer, if you would like to be listed on the honor roll, then we're all we're looking for at that point is what's your name, the service you were in, when you were in the service, as far as that goes. We're not looking for the serial number by any means, okay? But it's basic listing, truly like an honor roll. I'll show you a picture of a wooden plaque that's the concept for this thing anyway. And then that will go to by clicking on that, it will go to a page if they want to record something, or they may already have items that they've recorded. One of the things we inherited was over 80 cassette-based interviews, most of which seemed to come from when Senator Lugar's office back in 2002 and 2003 did the Veterans History Project. And we've had one of the people from the neighborhood association go through, create a listing of those. I think it's 82 tapes, and found out that a number of those, at least those people, seem to be listed in the Library of Congress in the Veterans History Project, and they have some interview there. We don't know whether it's the interview that we have, because these people would, in some cases, they'd record the war years meetings from that standpoint. So more volunteers to sit down there, and we also want to digitize it differently than it is, of course, on a cassette tape. but get it so that we can actually post that on our own website and have people have access to it. And we may have the benefit of having two different interviews for a a veteran. Doesn't matter. So that
There's
was
a guy I'm going to introduce you guys. His name is Sean Kunkel, and I
okay.
can't remember exactly the name of his company, but it's Voices of something. And what he does is when families will a lot of times will pay to have him come and interview their loved ones, their senior loved ones, to get
Okay.
good stories, to catch stories. I would imagine there's quite a few military based ones in there.
Yes.
So yeah, so
Right. Right. Um, this almost seems like in the weeds, but I just learned about it recently. In looking for information to what kind of guidance is out there for people who do oral history, especially with veterans. Well, there's a organization called StoryCorps, StoryCorps. It's a nationwide organization. They have apparently over 700,000 interviews of people, typically 40 to 50 minutes long, stored in the National Archives. And they've been doing this for several years. Well, they've created something called the Military Voices Initiative. Okay, so what would be the difference here between them and us, especially because the local studio for that, if they want to do that, is WFYI, or it can be done virtually. Okay. Um, and I asked them about, well, what's the difference between what you're doing and what the Veterans History Project does? I mean, our tax dollars are paying for that project. There are thousands of recordings there on that. It's different than the archive that StoryCorps has. And so what we found is if a veteran really just wants to have someone with good sound equipment and a facilitator there if they want, including bring a friend to have a conversation with, they'll record that and then they own that recording. The only thing that they have to sign off on is we're not going to commercialize it somehow, but they could use it if they want to promote something where they're using their story and all, but it doesn't go anywhere except in the National Archives unless they release it in some way. Um, I think that's an adjunct to what we're trying to do. That could augment what we're trying to do because for the veterans in the county, and we have to have a reasonable number of people which we can handle on this thing, right? Is record the history, in our case, record the story rather, and ask them if they want to have it for public knowledge so their families can get to it. And we'll give them a copy of the recording. We'll even AI allows us to give a word by word transcript so they get something like that to work with. And in two cases of veterans we've interviewed, Diana Glass and I, our secretary for the board, unfortunately, one just passed away last week, and the other one we hear may soon. So this is, as far as I know, the last recorded thing they have, and the families didn't hear some of these stories. They didn't know about this. So that becomes precious recordings in this case. Okay. Eventually, they're going to put them on the website. We have their permission to do that. With any luck, we'll get a number of other people. So what I found is the difference between this already established StoryCorps and their Military Voices Initiative is unless that's going to be something where you can promote it and say I'm going to release it from the not from the National Archives, but here's the link to go hear my story. It's not the same thing as what we're suggesting, which is a county website. Come to this one, hear it right away, because it's the permission of the veteran to do that. And if they
right.
say, "I'll tell you what, I I like the basic setup. I just like to record some things, but it's really more for my family." They can get a smartphone and sit there and record that if they want to. That's no big deal. If they want to have them be more durable, then we can say you might want to talk to the StoryCorps people. There's a local outlet for that, but that can augment what we're trying to do so that the families, and we're trying to interview every veteran who's willing to be interviewed. Because I'm not assuming that they are just because they say, well, I'd like to be listed. There are some veterans who have said, no, I don't want a public listing. They have their own reasons. That's all right. I still want them to know about this. Maybe they can make some connections. So with any luck, we'll get an increasing number of veterans who say, "Yeah, I understand what you're trying to do, and it's true. I've never really told them much of anything." So an example, I was at the one of the meetings last year with this history collaborative in the county, and a woman from the DAR was there, and I hadn't seen her before, and she said, my father was in an army unit that was repairing bridges during World War II around Mainz, Germany. Okay. And I said, I bet that was probably a combat engineer unit. Pretty sure that's what it is. But she never really heard much about what he did. She says, however, I learned that there was a plaque that was erected or affixed to that bridge that, you know, noted that this U.S. Army unit did this during the war. He said, oh, by the way, um, our family has an original photograph. It's not a copy of it, a photograph of General Patton standing there with his little white dog Willie on the bridge after the bridge was taken. He said the plaque was affixed on there later on. He says, my sister passed away. We think it's in her estate effects, and I'll send you a copy when I get it. Wonderful. The other part of that was she said, but my father never talked about what he went through. I just knew what I told you. Okay. Until apparently he was talking to I'm just going to picture a caregiver. He might have been in an assisted living place. I'm not sure. But anyway, she was there in the room too. And he started talking about some of his wartime experience. She'd never heard this before. So while he was busy concentrating telling that, she says, I had a video camera handy. I moved around behind his chair and I just set it up, focusing on him, recording what he said. All you can see is the back of his head, but that's the only thing I have of him telling his stories.
That's very cool, though.
Yeah, it's cool. And at the same time, how heartbreaking to go through that stuff
Oh, I
because,
know. It's well, I think of different stories, of that I have been. Well, I told you about my uncle. He never talked. We had as a whole family, we heard two stories of
yeah,
his. Okay, but then after, right before he died, I found out that he was a radio operator, which means he was right in the middle of
yep,
everything. So he would have seen some things, but he never, ever, ever said a word, and I think of, some other different ones that you hear of that, where it's like, they just aren't, a real good one of my best friends, they're not historians, okay, so they really don't,
right,
dates and things don't really mean anything to them. But
right.
her father was in World War II. He was in Battle of the Bulge, and he, with the behavior that he had for the rest of his life, I would say PTSD was a very big part of his life. And
Yep,
they would talk about every year he would disappear, just literally just disappear and be gone for days, weeks, or what have you. But when I said when was it, and then we looked it up, it was right during the Battle of Bulge time frame every year, and every
early
year he
December.
just took off. Yeah, so it's
Yep,
um, and then would walk back in like nothing had happened. But that was an every year occurrence, and he
right,
was gone before. In fact, we were sitting around having dinner one night, and I'm going, well, that was Battle of the Bulge. That
right,
was when he would leave. So
right,
yeah.
right. Interesting stuff. And yet, um, we come to care about these people,
Mhm.
and for we know them through other things. And so, if I remember correctly, you said you didn't learn until just after your uncle passed away. He'd been recently reading a book about a radio operator in Korea.
Correct.
What? What?
Yeah,
What a story!
I know. But I didn't know anything about it. And then
Right,
I think back in I'm in I fell down the rabbit hole of the ancestry and trying to do all the genealogy,
right.
and I found information about my two times great grandfather. My great grandfather Morgan was in the Spanish American War, so he was fighting in that. But then his father was in the Civil War. He was in the 80th Volunteer, out of Southern Indiana.
Yep.
Well, I know the day he mustered in. I know the day he mustered out because of the website for the 80th Volunteers. Okay, so I've been able to see that. But I also saw
Right.
all the battles that happened during that time frame. Those guys were right in the middle of everything. Some of those battles, they were talking about, like I said, I'm a history nerd. So, some of these battles where they were talking about their comrades were five deep dead in these
Yep.
things. They'd be standing on them to fight. and you couldn't step on the field without stepping on someone, type thing. And then,
Yep.
he was already, his group ended up, they're the ones that went down with Sherman to Atlanta and then out to the Carolinas. So they were in the last battle of the war.
Wow.
Okay. Well, I know nothing about him other than, I have one anecdotal comment from an older cousin who just passed. But she told me that grandma, my grandma, who I never, she died when I was 2, so I don't know anything about. She used to talk about her father-in-law, which would have been who that is, uh, would come home drunk so much that he had a really smart mule that would get him home. Okay. Well, if he'd seen all that stuff, again, that's not that hard for me to imagine from a PTSD standpoint. He was in some of the bloodiest battles in the Civil War. Okay. And I only know that
Yes.
because I know his dates, his unit, where he was,
Exactly. Exactly.
and then further back, his trying to think, I think it's his great grandfather. Okay. So my four
Okay.
times was a Marine surgeon in the Revolutionary War and was captured and was in a British prison ship in New York Harbor, which
Wow.
was the fact that he's alive, lived through that I was able to be born is miraculous because that was
Yes.
basically a death, thing.
Yes.
But I was reading a book about those ships, and it was like, oh my God, now I think I get what happened. Okay, because he was a surgeon, and the British did
Yes.
not want anyone to have any aid and comfort. So if they were medical, they immediately did a prisoner swap with them to get them out, so they wouldn't comfort
Yep.
the soldiers. That's probably why he lived.
Yes. Yep.
So
They may have, depending on their staff, they may have pressed him in the service on helping British soldiers and sailors.
yeah, who knows? So,
Yeah.
well, like I said, only reason I know some of these stories is because I know dates and places and where they were, and
Yes.
then I happen to know the history of what was going on.
Right.
Like he's the one that brought the family to Indiana, but that was
Ah.
when they were giving Revolutionary War veterans land in the Northwest Territory.
Okay.
Okay, because they couldn't pay them, and
Right.
his trail went from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, which was the landing zone where they boarded the flatboats to come down the Ohio.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
confused as to why he ended up in Kentucky because most of them ended up in Ohio. But I found
Yep.
out later, my family his family all the way back were these really hotshot, famous Baptist pastors. Well, there was this Baptist colony in Kentucky, which that explains why he was there. So, but
Yes.
it was, but
Yes.
it, but to me, those are the things that are fascinating. I mean, I don't know their story, but I know it
Right.
from here's all the stuff that happened around them at the
That's
exact
right.
same time
That's right.
has to be part of it.
And there's a number of situations where unit histories are what make the difference for so many people. And
Hmm.
we talk about ones that go back to the Revolutionary War, at least in our country, but especially um, Civil War and forward, especially after 1900, military, especially ground units, army units,
Right.
basically Marine units, you know, have had historians, and they make a point of collecting all that information. There's an abundance of that. At the same time, there's a lot of holes in it too.
Right. Yeah. So but it's fascinating when you start digging into this stuff because also these things start becoming unearthed.
Yes, yes,
So.
without a doubt.
Mhm. So where are you guys going from here? What are you looking for help? Are you looking for volunteers? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for what are you guys looking for?
Well, the two key things you just mentioned, the answer to that is yes, emphatically. So
Yeah.
there's no doubt that we need some money. We don't have a regular stream of income yet. And if someone wanted to say, well, wait a minute, wouldn't it have made more sense from a business standpoint? Because the museum's a business, it has to be just to keep the lights on, right?
Right.
Why not the funding first? This is like so many other things in life. You work with what you have at the time, and you scramble for the rest of it. So that's what we're doing. So basically, we need need funding, and it could be one-time donations here, or it could be we want to come up with a corporate sponsorship program. We'd like to come up with a membership with a museum kind of routine. And we don't need much as far as that goes, but collectively, I mean, over time, right? We'd be get an aggregate amount, so you've got a decent amount to keep the doors open. We probably need, I'll see, right now, without having firm insurance quotes at all yet, we'll probably need $4,000 to $5,000 a year to keep the lights on, keep it insured. We need Wi-Fi, for example. We need a scanner copier in the building itself. We could use a couple of computers. I mean, I've got some aging laptops that I will bring over there at some point. But anyway, so so definitely need that. The a key would think for this, and you've been in the buildings, you know how small it is. The only way we can tell these stories is to basically have a website. So
Right.
picture an iceberg, right? So what you see is the building above the water line. Everything else is going to be on a website from that standpoint. So what we'd like to do is at least have an exhibit for every major conflict from World War II up to present day. So that's covering at least a number of 6, 8 major conflicts as far as that goes. But also we've seen where a little known, but I'm sure there's more than enough information to be able to bring it forward, is women in service, for example, animals in service, POW, MIA, Guard and Reserve. So when we talk about the POW, MIA, and the Guard and Reserve here, why that sort of hit me up. Recently, I've been getting some help from the adjutant there at the Carmel American Legion Post, David Leonard, and just coming out of a conversation, what I realized was nowhere that I could find anyway was there a single listing we could go to in the county that says what are the names of the service people who are either POW or MIA. Doesn't mean it in this Vietnam era, which is typically what so many people are thinking about, at least living memory, right? Well, come to find out, he did some research, and from I think it's World War One through post Vietnam, he's come up with was able to find, I think it's 89 names of POW, MIA. I'm sure those people, that's somehow they were affiliated with the county. Okay. My sense of things is I'd like to be able to have a page for each one of those veterans. Contact the families. It's going to take some time to do that. So we need people to actually do that kind of research. The two DAR chapters have said that they will help. We're trying to line that up so we give them something to work with. So we'll need people to do some research like that. And it could be, somebody could say, I'll tell you what, I can do this for a couple hours every couple of weeks. And if I can sit at my computer, I can hunt things down. Sure, we'll help you figure out what to look for so we get that information. But then once we find out, for example, veterans who passed away, whether they're buried in the county or not, but we can somehow document they were affiliated with the county. Okay. We need to have somebody contact their families. And if nothing else, it's quote unquote the band's getting back together again. We're going to open this up as a public military museum. We would respectfully would like to have your veteran listed in this if it's okay with you, and especially if someone's passed away. We have no recordings that we can get for you to do that. But again, we're trying to have a good listing for the people. So we also need what I'm calling a deputy curator, my title, for each one of those conflicts. There are some people, I mean, David Highway, we'll just use him as an example. I don't know what his focus is, but if he says, tell you what, I know enough about this area, it's all part-time basis, it's volunteer, but I'll tell you what, I'll sort of kind of pay attention to that area of as a conflict for you, so that when we get offers to have people say, here, you want this, I don't. First off, we have to finish the inventory, which we're working on. We need some help with that, of course. So we know, what do we have? Someone can trace to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, at least those three, right? I put some stuff in there from Desert Storm. So they can pay attention. They know enough about it. I'm not looking for professional historians. I mean, this is all the local routine here as far as that goes. We want good information now, and we can say, all right, let's yeah, we've given you a copy of the information that lists all the stuff we have from that conflict. Okay, pay attention to it. At least give me a year. Okay, pay attention to this thing. So one of the things is when we get offers of these things, do some research if you need to, unless you can just look at it and say, well, that's pretty, may not be rare, but it's pretty good. And not being aware of anything else in the county or anybody else who has that, whatever it is. So they can do that initial triaging from that standpoint, value it possibly. Okay. So we need quote unquote deputy curators. So if somebody is interested in World War II, that's their focus. Great. Contact me. Okay. Um, we also are going to need what I'm calling an advisory board. So you can picture an executive board, which you need 3 people, trustees, as the state calls it, I've learned, just to get the nonprofit going. You can call them whatever you want to. In our case, we have a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. Right? We probably want to add at least a couple of positions there, but 4 or 5 people can't really run this thing, especially when it gets a good head of steam down the road. And I'm trying to build a foundation so that this is self-sufficient and really does a good job of the focus we're trying to do. Okay. So the advisory board would be, we need someone who can give us some legal advice on things. If they don't know enough about museums and the things that come up with that, do the research. Okay. We need people to help lead the fundraising effort. We need people who are in the municipal areas, 8 municipalities in the county, like somebody in there from each of those municipalities. Help us figure out how to collaborate with Carmel, collaborate with Westfield, collaborate with Fishers. Pay attention to the veterans organizations that are there as far as that goes. So that's what I'm calling an advisory board. That to look ahead for where do you guys think you want to be a year from now, let alone 5 years and 10 years. And frankly, I mentioned to you, I'd like to get to the point where I can walk in and get a cup of coffee in the kitchen and walk to the back room where the library is and sit down for 2 hours and not have to figure out how am I going to keep the place running.
Right.
That's a worthy goal, okay, for just about any of us. Um, Particular things that we definitely have to have. We need a Wi-Fi system in there. Last time I did some checking for a decent hockey puck, right, from AT&T or somebody, 45, $50 a month. Okay, that number's a couple of years old. But when people walk in there, they're going to need to be able to work in there for whatever we're doing and have access. Okay. We found a window treatment contractor who's willing to help us out, because one of the things that occurred to us, those are just regular plate glass windows, typical in a building, fairly recent, within the last decades or so. But we're seeing fading on the cloth products and the uniforms and
Right.
all. So he says, okay, so we talk with,
Photos and
yeah. So he says, I'd normally charge you X amount if you just, this was a house for these things, figuring, all right, this much UV protection. How about some shiny out surface so it's easy, it's difficult for people to look in through the window like after hours, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's going to cost us, I don't know, upwards of several $100s at least to get that done. We're going to need to have some kind of security system, and if nothing else, I want to be able to get cameras, a blink system. There's so many out there like that, because we can place them in there. I can't really access them when we're out of the building, though, unless there's a Wi-Fi system working.
right. Sure.
But I've got a home system like that, so we've got a little bit of experience doing that. We're going to have volunteers more than anything else, because, example, I've got 82 cassette tapes. Therefore, I could conceivably have about 82 hours, and I've learned, or I've been told by Jessica Lehman, who works with David Highway there. Yeah, we have brand new equipment in our Noblesville library, but the only way you do that to make a copy of it is it has to run in real time, and you're just porting it over to a USB drive, for example. Okay, I got about 82 hours worth of time. I got to have somebody sit there and listen to that and do this. So
Right.
there's a variety of things like the other real key thing is not too much longer from now, we're going to need some offsite storage. Example, something temperature controlled, whatever it's going to run us, probably easily a 10 by 20 storage unit from that standpoint, shelving in there, part of which is so that we can take everything off the walls, probably paint them. You've seen those walls. Okay. And then figure out when you walk in the door, I mean, there's basically 2.5 rooms where we have display items, and then one which is the library area. Okay, when you walk in, that left wall, which is however long it is, that's World War II. The other side of the room is Vietnam. If nothing else, we have to be able to do that. And it's not that we need that offsite storage for that, but we have to be able to get some things out and then eventually be able to rotate items through there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, what about how we promoting this thing in a way? Coming up right now, we have not only is this a good event for us, and I thank you very much for doing it. On the 9th, through someone who is actually from the Daughters of 1812, okay, who approached the museum for some other reason, um, said, "Well, I'm a volunteer down at the Palladium. Do you guys know about the military concert on April 9th?" Yeah, I mean, I knew it was coming because Diane and I had gone to the one a year ago when the President's own Marine Corps band was there. Well, she says this year it's going to be the U.S. Army Field Band and Soldier Chorus. What we found is in talking to their engagement and community outreach director, we're going to have a display there. We may have, if the people available, some reenactors in uniform to just basically mix with the crowd. You've seen the building and the stuff we have in there. So I'll have
Sure.
a backdrop trifold display. We don't have any money for much of anything, but nice tablecloth on a 6-foot table, and it'll be in a lobby area, and we'll be able to hand out business cards and say this is what it's all about. It's the only public museum in the county, and if you want to come see it, just give me a call. We hope later on, was it June 14th is Flag Day? It's
Yeah.
also the birth date of the U.S. Army. This year, just a few days ago, was the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps from 1775. Okay, we'd like to be able to have something that's an open house in there and focus on those things. I've got a matted and framed um, drawing, pen and ink drawing of Chesty Puller. Well, he was in Korea when one of the founders was there. Okay, during the
Right.
Korean War. It's on loan from the Carmel American Legion Post. That's of all the things they gave us. That one he didn't donate to us. If someone loan it to you, we don't have a place we're going to put it up at our place, but if you guys have it, so the thing literally measures, I don't know, 30 inches square.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of space for that, but that's a good piece to do it. We looked it up online. It's a limited set. Don't get some idea what the value is if somebody says, "Hey, I'd like to buy that off your hands." But it would fit very well with one of the two founders and others who were, because all the services represented. The only person we haven't found representing something is the Merchant Marine yet. But all 5 services, and of course the Space Force, newer from that standpoint. So we need some basic money for things. We need the Wi-Fi. We need offsite storage. More than anything, we need people who are interested in this. And the eventual one is to have people say, "I'll tell you what, I like talking to veterans. What can you arm me with? I got a digital recorder, or they have their own smartphone. We bought a few sets of double lapel mics. They go work wirelessly. They work pretty well. We bought one for a trial. It's worked out for a couple of times. We've used it, and we can then capture those stories. And now we're faced with, I've got 2 recordings made within the last few months. That's the only recording that we're aware of that family member was a veteran to be able to make.
Right.
It's we see things like that. Both men were over 90. Okay. Thursday, we're going to be seeing one of the fellows who's on that name plaque, which you saw there. And he's going to be 100 and later on in the year. But he's still spry. As a matter of fact, his girlfriend, if that gives you an idea, she's the interface we have to try to be able to get a little bit of his time. We need people who are interested in this. They want to be able to help and listen to the stories where they can.
A place you ought to go if you're ever in Castleton, go to Indiana Funeral Care. It's at
Okay.
82nd and Allisonville,
Okay.
and they have a really nice military museum inside that chapel.
Really?
Yes. So
Never
now,
heard of it.
Yeah, it's they've got a really nice display of stuff there. So it's
That's
something I
great.
think you should at least meet these people, you know. So
Well, exactly, exactly.
mhm,
So the closest museum that I know about is the Museum for 20th Century Warfare on the old Fort Harrison grounds. They do
mhm,
reenactments. I've been in the buildings once last summer. Um, they've got some good people. I've met Chris Schneider, who's their president in that and all, and they've been around for a number of years now. Unfortunately, I've only been on the in the location one time from that standpoint, but what I hope to do is be able to make connections, and I can show you that in one of the slides we have here. There's a number of places we'd like to be able to connect to. One of which, of course, would be the other museums in the area. And as far as I'm concerned, we're all in the same situation. How
sure,
we can't have everything by any means. I think we're unique in a sense that we want to focus on the stories of the veterans, and with any possibility of getting at least an oral history. Example, the woman who's the manager of that Military Voices initiative of StoryCorps started out her presentation at WFYI last week with, I'm a Navy veteran. I was in the Navy for 4 years, actually met my husband on board ship. We're still married. We've got kids now, all that stuff. And I prize the large amount of letters my grandmother wrote to me. Those are really precious to me. I don't have one recording to hear her voice. And it was it was interesting. You could tell that she was concerned about that. I'm sure she's told the story many times, but
right,
it just seems that seems to add an additional thing. In our case, for example, the at the Palladium, we'll have a uniform and other items that we've been able to trace to local veterans. And we're going to make the point that you've seen, well, all the stuff that's in there. We're going to make the point. This person was here, they served, and at least the one uniform I'm thinking about, unfortunately, passed away. But that's the kind of stuff we want to build. I can't get a recording unless the family has something,
sure,
let alone about their service. But let's make this more real. It's a case of let's preserve and connect.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, John, this is really exciting. I'm really excited about the fact that you're pouring yourself into this to resurrect this little thing that's been sitting there for a while. So let's see some pictures of your place here.
Sure, sure. Let me, if I may, let me hit share, and then I will get to. Let's go to. There we go. And share that. And what I'm going to do is let me make this the slideshow. All right,
There we
see
go.
that okay?
Yep.
All right, good. Not much to it. Um, that's where we are. That's the museum itself. And we started with just a couple of people as far as that goes. And they, I think what they did is they basically moved their coffee klatch to this building. And I find out that Marvin Pike, only learned this recently, was actually the deputy trustee for the township. So I have a feeling that might have been an end to being able to use that building.
Yeah.
Um, every veteran has a number of connections to people throughout their lives, before their service, during the service, and afterwards. And I realized as I was originally putting this together, I found myself keep adding things. So the cassette up there is because we've got a number of cassette recordings. Who knows what other things they may have? They have their DD 214 that says this is my service. That way we can document that. In this case, the guy was a postal carrier when he came back. All right. But also, at some point, he passed away, and he's buried here in the county. So there's a lot of different things which we could talk about. Okay. Um, this is a photograph of not only the two founders, Marvin Pike on the left and Jack Edwards, but also that is a plaque which the Greater Neighborhood Association um, um, gifted to those two gentlemen when they were alive, as well as everybody else on that plaque was alive. Since that time, you see a number of little dots on there. Someone updated that as those veterans passed away, and it's not current from that standpoint. Probably most of those guys are not with us anymore. But picture that as sort of a landing page in a way, and that could be a listing of the person's name, the branch they are in, when they were in service, those kind of things. Well, where do I get to go from there? That may be all that we have, and I'm just using that as a working concept here. when you get to this, that's where they can, there's other information which they're going to have. So they were in a conflict somewhere or not. They could have been stateside. It didn't matter. But in this case, I'm showing the Korean War from that standpoint. The veteran had a role there. There were certain things they did that made it more personal for them, but they also had photos. In this case, there was an interview. There's some stories they could have gotten, saved letters from home or letters that they wrote home and they were given back to them when they got there, that kind of thing. And there's a number of things. So everything in there is donated by a veteran. So they'll have some personal items on display. What I hope to do is have a like a QR code or whatever the technology is going to be on probably everything that's displayed, or at least a medal set or something. We're in a store somewhere. We want to look something up. We immediately whip out our phone and look at it. Well, click the QR code. That'll take you to that veteran's page, and the information on there as the people researching learn about them. Well, gee, that's an older boot. That's not the kind of boot I saw somebody wear when they went to Afghanistan. Yeah, okay, so that came from World War II. All right, and so when we get a link that we can put on there, that'll take you to information about that item, not just the fact that this was something donated by the guy himself. Okay. Um, Going out at the more we thought about it, we want to be able to connect to that Veterans History Project, so the Library of Congress, other museums in the area, including, especially here in the county from that standpoint. The Legion and VFW posts, they have their own web pages or standalone websites as far as that goes. Municipalities, but also we'd like to get tourists, to think about this kind of place. So there's the county tourism bureau, those kind of things. But also, there's collectors, private collectors in our county, and they range from Revolutionary War on up to present day. Most of the collections they have in their homes. They may have a large outbuilding or something. But I talked to one Civil War fellow in Noblesville last year, and one of the things he told me was, he says, I have 100 Civil War era rifles in my house, and they all work. But he said he was in the entertainment business, and he said I did fairly well, so I have more space than just that. But that's okay. So if a collector says, I'd like people to know that there's a collection in the area, I'm not going to publish my street address because, frankly, it's in my house. I don't want them to. I don't want to get robbed. Okay, perfectly understand. But if they'd like to have us know that that kind of collect, whatever their focus is, they all focus on something, right? Then we can list that and say, you want to learn more about this, by the way, you can drive across town or the county and you can actually see stuff and talk to a collector. So that's basically what that's for. So this is some pictures of the interior of the items we have. Again, it's fairly small. We started inventorying this stuff, and eventually we're going to have to get software we can have, an inventory item number, who donated it, all those things. That's part of the front room, and that's almost the overflow on the books we have. And I think I estimated we got 800 or 900 books from that standpoint. Those are boxed models up on the boxes on the top of that bookcase as far as that goes. That's the left picture is in the library itself. And that's only one portion of it. We have sets like that. People looking more closely, they'll see that second shelf down in the right-hand picture. Those look an awful lot like Civil War munition items, basically mini balls, things like that. Didn't find out until recently that Marvin Pike was a Civil War buff, and he donated collections of items to both the War Memorial downtown Indianapolis, and apparently Ball State has a fairly large library that have a good collection of those things. So that's there because that was his interest. And that's the sign out front that so many people have driven by. I've lost count of the number of conversations. Like, I drive by here and I've had some people say literally every day. And no sign of life. How can I get in? Well, I don't know what's in there. So right now, someone should contact me, and we'll be able to get you in for that. And I'm a chronic volunteer, so if someone says, "Hey, I can't do this till 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon," come talk to me so we can get you at least see it. I think that's about it. That is it on the pictures as far as that goes.
Yeah, I was going to say that's how we met. Was I called, but hey,
Yeah.
Well, I am very excited. This was phenomenal. We will make this a
I've never been
YouTube.
accused of that, so thank you, Jim.
Yeah, well, we'll make this a YouTube. I'll give you a copy of it, use however you want, and
Sure.
we'll try to get this thing out and about so more people know about you. I also need to do some introductions. I don't know if you know Doug Roush or not, but Doug is the commander of a uh, uh, reenactment brigade here. Okay,
Yep.
and they have done the Gettysburg uh, event, several different times. Okay, so they
I hear he's a calligrapher, and I
yes,
know
he
that.
is actually.
Okay,
Yes.
I know that because he's a running buddy with Steve Hardwick, who's that teacher.
Okay, well there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so there, there's people that there's a lot of us nerds out here, so we just need to figure out how to
Yes.
put them together. So, well, John, thank you so much for sharing with us, and I really appreciate your time and all the work you're doing.
Jim, thank you. I much appreciate it.
Well,
This has been useful to say the least.
we are excited about it. I was very excited to have you on here, so we'll get this thing going. But I guess we've gone a little long, but that's great. There was good information, so I will put this in our system. I'll get you a copy of it, and let's see what we can do about making some more noise.
Sure, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
You
Bye
too.
bye.